Hello, my name is Scott McDonald. 3 years ago, roughly, in July of 2021, I recorded a video all about my experience with chronic urticaria and talked about what I did to get myself into remission. Um, I wanted to post again as an update to that video, now that it's been 3 years, and share a few of the things that I've learned since posting that video, a few things that have helped sort of keep me in remission, and things that I do when the hives start ramping back up. Um, Before I get started, though, I just wanted to say a huge thanks to anybody who watched that video and commented on it. Quite a few people did comment and left some really kind words, and I really appreciate that. And for those of you who have shared your experience, I think it's been very helpful for people that have come and watched the video, because when you've got chronic urticaria, the thing that's so hard to come by is hope. And you read that throughout the comments, and I really thank everybody for participating in that way and helping everybody else out. So thank you for that. So yeah, this is just an addition to what I've already put on my YouTube channel. For those of you who are coming into this video without having seen my original, I'll put the link to it in the notes so you can flip over there and check it out. My story with chronic urticaria goes back quite a ways. I had it when I was in my 20s and had it straight through my 20s for about 7 years in a row. It went away for about 15 years and then came back with a vengeance 15 years later. And when I had the hives, chronic urticaria, it was really quite severe. I had them all over my body. They were completely uncontrolled. Anybody who's had hives knows how terrible it is. It's like having every one of these little dots is like a mosquito bite. When you scratch it, it causes three or four more. And my experience with it was when the hives were bad, I would just it would be like having like 2,000 mosquito bites all at the same time. Anybody who's suffering with this, I just absolutely feel for you. It's the worst thing to go through. It's so uncomfortable. People around you have a really hard time relating to what you're going through. It's very isolating. It's terrible. So I really hope that between the videos I published before and some of the new thinking in this video, that hopefully there's something in here that can help you. What I'm doing with this video is essentially sharing some things that I've learned that get me into remission a lot faster. So in my previous videos, I shared a whole bunch of strategies around diet and some supplements and so forth that really helped get me into remission. So, some strategies that I used that were working for me. I found it in the years after I published that initial video, right around the fall, typically, funny enough, I would tend to kind of run the risk of the hives coming back. And they did come back a couple of times, and I would go back to my strategies, from that video, and I would be able to get myself into remission. But it would take time, and it was difficult. And so I continued to research and experiment with things. And I found three things that really helped accelerate get into remission. And they were really quite surprising, actually, especially two of them. Two of them are really quite surprising for me. So these are strategies in addition to what I published before that help accelerate getting better, essentially. And I'm in a position now where I just I guess when I published the videos before, I was feeling comfortable because I could reliably get into remission. And so if they would start to flare up a little bit in the fall, I could get them under control again. Now I just live without them, and I've got strategies that keep me in maintenance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over those three things I mentioned that really accelerate getting into remission. I'm going to go over what I do to stay in remission, and just kind of give you that sort of look at things from a newer perspective. There's been some new things that have come out. And I'll preface all this, as I did probably last time, just to say, it's important that you know that I have no medical background at all. I'm not a doctor. Or have any exposure to any kind of that, any kind of that training. I'm just somebody who's suffered with chronic urticaria for years and has done a ton of research and has done a ton of experimentation. So I know what works for me. Every physiology is different, so beware the sample of one, but hopefully there's something in here that might work for you. I'm going to mention a bunch of things too, supplements and different products and things. None of these are anything that I'm connected to in any commercial way. I don't even have partner links to Amazon or anything like that. I always want this advice to come from a sincere place. I just want to help. So there's this channel will never be monetized, or there will never be partner links here. These are just things that worked for me, and hopefully they will for you too. So with that. And with thanks for your patience in advance, because I think it's going to take me a little bit of time to go through all this. I'm going to just dive right in. I said I wanted to cover first, 3 things that really came to light as areas to focus on to get better. And the number one thing, and this will take me the most time to go through, but it's definitely number one with a bullet, is I wanted to talk a little bit more about stress. My first video, I did talk about stress. It was at the end of the video. I know a lot of folks who saw the video probably didn't make it all the way through the end. I know I was pretty long-winded in that video too. But it really is, and it has certainly come to light in reflecting on everything and experimenting with things in more recent years, that it really is a huge driver. And I wanted to hit on some things that surprised me. The thing that I guess led me down the stress route is I had done enough looking around and experimentation that I kind of exhausted all the physical stuff. I had a diet that was working, that I could count on, that was really reducing histamines in the body. I had looked into the supplementation. I was doing everything that I had any knowledge of from a physical perspective, and the only thing I was left with was stress. And so taking a deep dive into that really bore fruit for me. It's a very interesting thing when you start digging into the science. There is such a strong connection between hives and stress. It's very well documented. And when you start digging into the scientific literature, you just find study after study. It's very, very directly connected. But stress, as I came to learn, is it's kind of sneaky, and it comes in different forms, and it comes in forms that I didn't really have an awareness of. But if I go back to the period, especially more recently when the hives came back after that 15-year period, I had signs of stress, and there's lots of signs of stress that I wasn't aware of. But when I look back, even before the hive started, I had problems with acid reflux, heartburn, that kind of thing. I was clenching my teeth at night so bad, actually, that I now wear a mouth guard, because I ground my enamel right down to nothing during those years. I was getting headaches, actually quite severe migraines. I still will get migraines with aura, which is a really bizarre visual effect. Pretty severe headaches, sleep issues, restlessness. All this kind of stuff was just a part of life for me before the hive started. So it was a bit of a canary in the coal mine for me. And even, signs of stress even showed up in physical testing. Like when the hive started, as I talked about this in my previous videos, I was doing a lot of testing to figure out what was wrong. And there were signs of stress. Like I had reduced amounts of secretory IgA that showed up in some of the testing that I was doing. And that's associated with hives, but it's also directly linked to stress. And I had no idea. When I published the last video, I wasn't aware of that connection either. But stress is directly connected to reducing levels of secretory IgA. I also had reduced beneficial gut bacteria, and I talked about that in the previous video. There's a real connection between gut health and hives as well, but a lot of that is directly connected to stress too. I wasn't really aware of that connection, so there were some real physical, aspects of this that were directly tied to the stress. So what was stressing me out? Well, it was a variety of things, some of which I wouldn't really call stressful. But I've really come to learn how important they were in the overall equation. So I thought I'd give a sense, just maybe some of this is relatable to you. But number one, I had a crazy job. I had that job for a long time, a lot of hours, but also a real lack of control. Work would come out of nowhere, and it would be evenings, weekends, just all the time, and very hard to do the kind of work I was doing in a way that would be satisfactory to everybody. It was just knowledge work, which is largely opinion based, but just a very difficult job to perform in and hold a high level of performance. There was a lot of expectations on the role, and it was just a stressful job. So that was kind of obvious stress. We all kind of deal with that. But I did notice that if I had a big presentation, which I had many of, if I had very difficult meetings, difficult conversations, which I had a lot of, um, the hives would be slightly worse after those. Like, they would cause the hives to ramp up. But the problem was a flare-up, as anybody who has this, and you're probably watching this and relating to these flare-ups, a flare-up lasts a full week at least. So when the hives get bad, they don't just get bad for a couple days. It takes a full week for it to really settle down to nothing. And in the job that I had, there was just never a full week to settle down. And it takes a long time for that hive process, that ramp up, to really settle out. So I could just never come down enough in the work I was doing. And I would notice it around anything stressful. I've always loved music and playing guitar. I had the hives one time, going through the strategies in the first video. I once had the hives reduced very, very low, and was doing quite well, but then got up on stage to perform, playing guitar for the first time, really. I'd never really played for an audience, and set up in this little pub with my band and played, and I just, you know, broke right out after that, and had hives in a terrible way, probably like a month or two after, and it took me that long to come back down, doing the diet and everything else I talked about in the other videos. So it was really, I really noticed that direct connection to just what you would perceive as stress, and then identify, things in life that were stressful. But that was the obvious stress. There's several things that I didn't really tune into that fall into the same category, that was really illuminating for me. One was alcohol. Now, alcohol is directly tied to hives. There's probably, I think, in the research I've done, there's just a ton of different ways that it impacts hives. I think there's 5 different mechanisms by which it actually creates hives. It contains a ton of histamine, first of all. It causes your body to release histamine that's already, stored and at the ready. It destroys DAO, which is an enzyme that breaks down histamine. It also really destroys, or it has a hard impact, at least, on the gut lining. And the gut lining and gut health is just so tied to all this. And poor gut health tends to end up releasing histamine, as far as I understand. Very direct connection there. So the alcohol thing is interesting, and I always enjoyed, wine and beer and that kind of thing. I didn't really think too much about it, but it also drives stress. And there's a great talk on YouTube. Anybody who's familiar with the Andrew Huberman Labs podcast will probably have seen this. It's a podcast that's gotten a ton of views. But what's really interesting watching this, the health impacts of alcohol go far beyond what we know about. It also sets up um, a state of being, call it, where you actually raise your baseline level of stress day to day. Alcohol does this, and marijuana does this as well, which is also news to me. But if you're a regular drinker, and that doesn't need to be a lot of alcohol, unfortunately. It's just, if you're a regular consumer of alcohol, which I was and am today, it raises your baseline level of anxiety and stress. It's just what the chemical does. I had no idea. And that's something that can really contribute to just living in this state of fight or flight, or sympathetic nervous system activity where you're just always on. That can really have a big effect. Also, the deep sleep effect that alcohol has, it really destroys your ability to get a good deep sleep, and that affects your ability to recover from stress as well, on a on a regular basis. When you're exposed to those sorts of stimuli, it just makes it harder to come back to normal. Um, that was really interesting, and that Huberman talk is really worth looking at if you're somebody who is a regular drinker. The other thing that really surprised me is there's a whole understanding of stress associated to your social connectedness, and this is quite well understood as well. There's a chemical in your body called substance P, or tachykinin, that I'd never heard of before, but it's associated with this need that we all have for social connectedness, social belonging, and that can get complex. That's the need to have friends around and family, but it's also like the need to have people that you trust and feel comfortable around. And social hierarchy plays into this too. And this is where I think I was really struggling at work. It was part of why my job was stressful. As human beings, we're very aware of where we sit in the pack. And if there's something that happens, or if there's some change, and your hierarchy is affected, if all of a sudden you find yourself at the bottom of a social hierarchy, and that can be, maybe you've moved to a new city, maybe you're new at a company, you don't know anybody yet. Maybe, you're in a new situation where you just don't feel comfortable or well established in your tribe, so to speak. That's very stressful for the human being. And I certainly had that playing out within my work situation. I also had a collection of really close friends that one by one had kind of moved away to pursue, work opportunities and so forth. And I went from having probably close to 9 or 10 like really close friends in town that I'd known for decades, kind of thing, that had all kind of moved away and kind of left me in a spot where I was without that the comfort of that social group. I didn't really think about that as stress, but it's apparently very stressful, and something that really needs to be considered. Another thing too that's interesting is the idea of unexpressed emotion, especially anger. So if you're like me and you like to have an interface with the world that's more based on positivity and cooperation and so forth, it can be hard to let people know when you're frustrated. And I know I was guilty of that, and I've learned quite a bit in that side of things. But that if you've got an unhealthy relationship, if there's somebody where you're in a position where you're not where it's not acceptable to express anger, or it would damage the relationship too much in your opinion, and you don't want to go there, you're avoiding conflict, that kind of thing, that can really, really drive stress. And then the final thing I'll mention, on this stress idea, is the Holmes-Ray stress inventory. And I mentioned that in my last video, but that's really worth a look at when it comes to how humans process change and that sort of thing. It's basically a study where they've taken a series of participants, and through talking to this rather large cohort of people and then tracking their health outcomes over years, they were able to put together an inventory that essentially works like a questionnaire. And there's a list of all these stressful life events, and you give yourself a score on each of them. So it's things like as horrible as the death of a child or death of a spouse or something like that, right down to the holidays. Prepping for the holidays and getting meals ready for guests in your home and all that. So terrible stress, terrible bad stress, and what might be good stress, but it's still stress. It's an activated state of being. Um, People that score between like 100 or 150 and 300 on this scale, once they add up all their points for these stressful events, um, are something like 50% more likely to have a health breakdown, in the coming, like in the short term. And if you score over 300 points, you're 80% likely to have a major health breakdown. So, you add up all those things. Um, some of them are obvious factors, some of them aren't. But like for myself, between stressful job, regular social consumption of alcohol, friends moving away, definitely some unexpressed anger, and even on the Holmes race, some big changes in life. All that adding up is a lot more detrimental than I ever thought. So these are things for me that were really worth reflecting on. And as far as how you solve this, for me, number one, just being aware of it really helped. And there was a whole series of books that I read that really sharpened my attention to things like this and got me thinking about it. And that got me acting on it and making changes. And that made a world of difference. And my hives, I swear, just got better as I started reading some of these things. I'll go through a quick short list because I definitely found insights in these, and then you might as well. Skin Deep is a really interesting one. I mentioned that in my last video. That's just a book that talks a lot about the connection between the mind and the skin, and has some great case studies of people that have manifested a health issue in their skin primarily because of what was going on in their mind, and they go through some really interesting examples. When the Body Says No, that is an incredible book. I've never turned down the pages more on a book. I feel like that book was like just talking to me. It was an incredible read. And again, it's all about you know, a connection between your health and how you interact with the world. And if you're giving too much, sacrificing too much, working too hard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about how the body will shut that down, and it explains a lot of chronic illness. And it's not an airy fairy thing. It's by a psychologist, Canadian psychologist, Gabor Mate, who's written a few books. But this one in particular is just, man, I've never read anything so connected to my own personal experience. Really enlightening. And just reading that made me feel better. It's unbelievable. The Body Keeps the Score is another one that's very good. That's kind of along the same lines, but goes a little deeper into some of the therapies around trauma and that kind of thing, which is interesting. Feeling Great is a good book just about managing anxiety, and that kind of thing is just very helpful, like in terms of strategies. So that's been a good read for sure. Um, so all of those are great. And reading them, I know for me, gave me what I would call a sense of control, I guess, and it just made me realize what I was steeping in terms of stress, and was a big part of how I manage stress better. Um, so now, I coming out of all that, meditation has been a big part of how I get the hives into remission. The mind is the chemist, overseeing this whole chemical system that we live in. I would say I have not once gotten into recovery without doing meditation. And I talk about meditation in more detail in the other videos. But far and away the most effective tool, I think, out of everything. You have to stick with it. For me, it would take like a week at least of doing meditation to see any difference. It's something that happens over time, and winding down the stress is something definitely that happens over time. Can't stress that enough. It takes months to get yourself out of a situation where you're just living at this level of stress. Down is a process of months. It just is, which is hard to hear, and I certainly didn't have the patience for it, but it's played out for me so many times. I've just seen that. So meditation for sure, and hypnosis as a form of meditation that's easier. Like listening to a hypnotic recording. I had somebody here in Toronto that did a targeted session for me and recorded it, and it was great. I could listen to it again and again. Listen to it every night. I would meditate in the morning and listen to that at night, and that was a big part of getting into remission. I also started doing what they call the physiological sigh. You can look this up. This is a trick I got from the Andrew Huberman podcast as well. But that's just something I do now as a routine maintenance thing during the day when I'm ramping up, and I know I'm stressed. I've come out of a big presentation, or I'm getting ready for a big presentation, and I'll do this physiological sigh. It's essentially just deep breathing, and all the technique is two big breaths in and a long breath out. So it's like fill your lungs and then fill them a little bit more. So you got no more room left, and you just let the air out slowly. And you can look that up. It's proven to bring your heart rate down. It sort of puts you into a more parasympathetic nerve system kind of a state. It really helps just incorporating that into the day, just breathing. It's amazing. And I also make now a real point of seeing friends and making sure I keep social life. I'm somebody who it's very easy for me to just work all the time. It's something that's just in my nature. So I try now to make a point of seeing friends on a regular basis, making sure I've got good social activity, making sure I'm having a nice coffee with my wife in the morning, all that kind of stuff, just building in moments to relax with other people. Really makes a big difference. So I know that's a lot, but I really wanted to hit on stress and provide a little bit more color and detail around that, because I just don't feel like I did it justice in the first video, and it is the number one thing that brought the hives on for me, and it's the number one thing that causes them to return. So had to go there. Next couple things are kind of short, and these were very surprising and crazy effective, and really easy to incorporate. So definitely worth mentioning. So I guess the next thing on the list that really helps accelerate the process of getting into remission for me is sunlight. I got turned on to this because I was noticing that the hives would always try to return in the fall. It was always the fall. Now I'm here in Canada, so here in Canada, fall, the days get shorter. The sun starts to go down earlier. You find yourself outside less because it's colder. It's also a busy time of year. You tend to kind of be working more and so forth. But it was a long time pattern over and over that hives already would just return in the fall. I have an old friend, Elliot Beaton. He's a tenured prof who teaches in the psych department at University of New Orleans, and he runs the stress, cognition, and effective neuroscience laboratory there. And Elliot, if you're listening, thank you. You've saved my life, probably more on more than one occasion. But anyway, Elliot's an old friend, knows me well, and he knows this struggle of mine with the chronic hives. And I was just talking to him one day, and the hives had just come back. It was like an October time frame, and he said, I wonder if this could be like a SADS thing, like a seasonal affective disorder thing. And he said, vitamin D is so closely tied to sunlight. You're living in Canada, you're working all the time. maybe you're just not getting enough vitamin D, like real actual sunlight. Um, so I thought, well, that's interesting. And I started looking into that a little bit. And as a quick fix, I went out and I bought a light, just a light to put on my desk. When I talked to Elliot, he was mentioning his father, who's an architect and does some work up north. And he said up north where, by up north, I mean like, the Arctic. They don't have a lot of sun for good portions of the year. And everybody puts these lights on their desks. As part of managing the health risks of like working in that kind of environment. So I did that, and I went out and I found a light, and these are really easy to find. There's one I'll show you a picture of here that I started with, and I got another one here that's actually on my desk right here. Oops, can I unplug that to show you? Yeah, I can. Just like this. This is another type of light. But these, they're all over Amazon. They're not expensive, and as long as they have a full UV spectrum of light, and as long as they're as bright as 10,000 lux or above, they're a pretty good way of replacing the sunshine that you might not be getting. So I started putting one of those on my desk. And the first time I did that, I was covered in hives. It was a really bad hive thing. I'd just been through a terrible Christmas. I wasn't able to eat anything. I was on my diet. I was doing my meditation. And I was slowly improving like I would. Um, I got back from this Christmas visit. We were visiting family and got this light to come in from Amazon. I put it on my desk. And in 2 weeks, I went from being covered in hives down to nothing. I could not believe it. Now, I was doing everything else. I was, the meditation, the diet, everything, the supplements, everything I ran through in the first video. But usually that would take, like a month and a half, 2 months at least, bare minimum. And in 2 weeks, I was just done. I couldn't believe it. Um, I also started incorporating walks as much as I could to get outside and get the sunshine. And there's also something that walks were always a big part of, I felt like they were always a big part of what brought me into remission. And I mentioned some of that in the last video too. But I also came to learn through one of the books I mentioned there, that When the Body Keeps the Score, they talk about a new treatment for trauma called eye movement desensitization reprocessing, EMDR, which is it's an interesting technique where a therapist will get somebody to recall a traumatic event while they're having them watch their finger and just kind of move their eyes back and forth. Sounds bizarre, but it really has proven to be an effective treatment, and walking has a certain amount of that built into it. So there's something about the forward motion of walking that the theory being that maybe it's because you're moving away from a potential danger or something, or the process of scanning the horizon back and forth just naturally as you walk might provide some of those same benefits. All again, just theories that I've read about, but there's definitely something to walking, and it might be the additional light in your eyes as well as the motion of the retina itself. I don't know, but there's definitely something there. So wanted to mention sunlight because it made a heck of a difference for me. And now I just keep a light on my desk and it's just part of my morning routine. I'm doing everything I can to make sure hives don't come back, and that's just part of my routine now. So it was a total surprise for me. Thought I'd mention it because man, what a difference that made. And now I build it into my routine. So I try to get outside as much as I can. I try to get light in my eyes without sunglasses, even like first thing in the morning as much as I can. That's interesting. Third thing that really, really helped to accelerate getting into remission was fasting. And I mentioned fasting in my first video, but I talked about it in terms of skipping breakfasts 1 day a week. And since that, I've been experimenting more with fasting, and came across somebody who was all over YouTube, a doctor by the name of Mindy Peltz, and she's got a lot of great content on YouTube. She wrote a book named Fast Like a Girl. That's, fasting strategies specific for women because they have a different, physiology, especially related to their cycle and so forth. But that doesn't mean it's not a great book for guys either. Some really interesting strategies in there, and she has a whole pile of content associated to using fasting to do an autoimmune reset. So that really caught my interest, and I started experimenting with that and found it to be crazy effective. I started by like just getting into the routine of skipping breakfast. So just, I would eat my dinner, say by 7 or 7:30 or something at night. I'd be finished eating, and I just wouldn't eat again until noon the next day. Took me a little bit of time to work up to that, but once I adjusted to it, I found it quite easy. In fact, very easy to do, and that made a huge difference to the hives. And now, the thing with fasting is that there's a balance there that I really do need to mention. Um, Skipping breakfast, I didn't find too bad because I could make sure I got enough calories in between noon and 7 at night that I wasn't really reducing my calorie intake too much. I was still eating the same amount of food. I was just doing it in a window. But that alone made a big difference to the hives. I experimented with doing longer fasts, and certainly Mindy Peltz's recommendations around doing an autoimmune reset fast are longer. And I found that those longer fasts, and I did 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, experimented with different lengths. I found that the 3 day fasts in particular were actually very, very good for reducing the hives. But there was a balance because when you're not eating for a period of time like that, it is stressful. So you're managing the stress of not eating, um, and that's difficult because it does cause cortisol release. It does drive stress in the body. So what I found was that I couldn't do that when the hives were brutal, but I could do it once the hives started to improve, and it would cause the hives to improve much more rapidly. So what would happen was I would start a longer fast, like a 3 day fast, and I would actually get like once I got to day 2 or something, I would have some immediate relief because I wasn't taking in any histamines, and um, that would be good. But then I would start to get hives because I was stressed. And sleep gets hard too because you're kind of on high alert. You're stressed. You're in that cortisol, sympathetic nervous system kind of state of being. Um, but after the fast was done and I started getting food back into the system, the hives would drop to a level lower than they were at before the fast. So I saw some really good results with that. And for a while, I started fasting on Wednesday. So I just didn't eat on Wednesday. So I was doing like a 36-hour fast once a week. And again, it would ramp the hives up a little bit, but then they would drop to lower than they were. And I did that for a while, and that worked really well. So, but even just skipping breakfast made a big difference. So it's something that, again, everybody's physiology is different, but man, it really worked for me. It was surprising. So, um, so I'll put links to all this stuff, in the notes or the video description, so you can check it out. But yeah, highly recommend taking a look at Mindy Peltz's fasting content because that was a real surprise. So those are the three things that really made a big difference that were news to me that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention who's interested in this video. So looking into stress, really getting a handle on that, and putting some solutions in place around that. The light, vitamin D, and the fasting. Those were three real surprises. Um, Next, I'll talk about just what I'm doing for maintenance and give you a sense because right now it's been really it's been 2 years for me now with really no hive issues at all. I've had, I would say 1 year of very much under control with these mechanisms. And every now and then the hives would try to come back, but I just squashed them immediately. And I really haven't had any major issues. And that was for like a year. But for the last year, I have had no hives, zero whatsoever. And this is not even trying to even come back, not remotely even that sense that they might come back. But that's because of controlling stress and that sort of thing. And then the following maintenance items. So I'll just take you through a quick kind of run through of what I do now to make sure they don't even come back. So first of all, I've really reduced the amount of alcohol that I have, and I've taken longer periods away from it. Like 3 months with nothing, and now I kind of come and go from it. I'll kind of have a month where I don't have it at all, and then I'll kind of right now I'm kind of enjoying it a bit. I'm going on vacation in a week. That's kind of what typically gets me back into it. I really enjoy red wine, and I really enjoy craft beer. But these days, it's only here and there. I'll probably have 2 to 4 or 5 drinks a week, probably, if I'm having alcohol that week. Whereas before, I mean, to be honest, I was probably having between 10 and 20 drinks if I'm if I'm really taking a good account of things. So that's a pretty significant drop. And I know for me, alcohol was definitely an aggravating factor in the hives. And I've noticed I'm not as stressed either, having that lower level of alcohol. Definitely, I'm not living on the edge like I always was. I'm not as racy and anxious as I typically would have been. So that's one big thing, reducing that. I also tend to think of sunlight as a vitamin now. It's kind of a weird way to put it, but I do think of it that way. And so I make a point of getting sun in my eyes. And I don't always get out of the house on busy days, but I will definitely stand in front of the patio and open the door, even in the winter when it's freezing cold. I won't step outside, but I'll open the door in the morning and enjoy my coffee and just make sure I'm getting real light into my eyes for a few minutes. And I get out for a walk as much as I can. And right now, I'm lucky I can walk to work back and forth, which has been amazing. So doing that, vitamin D, I take 4,000 international units of vitamin D. As part of all the testing and so forth I was doing, I also had like a DNA test to see where I have a propensity to need certain supplements. And vitamin D, I've often shown low in blood work, and the DNA testing shows I have a hard time, or I'm likely to have a hard time processing vitamin D properly. So I take 4,000 international units. I also take it in oil sublingually under my tongue, like that, with an eyedropper. And I have the vitamin D I take has K in it as well, vitamin K. So there's no issues with calcium. It's just an important combination to make sure the calcium is getting into your bones as it should. I take magnesium, magnesium complex during the day, and then magnesium L3 threonate or no, theanine at night, just because it's good for sleep. I've read that magnesium has a lot to do with how vitamin D is actually uh, used in the body. So doing that. I really like seed as a probiotic. Gut health, again, being such an important thing for the hive situation overall. But seed is neat. Seed is something you may have seen advertised, but it's an interesting delivery technology. There's an outer shell, like a fibrous outer shell to the pill, and then the actual probiotic is on the inside of the pill, a separate pill. It's a pill inside a pill. And then the pill inside is also surrounded by all this fibrous material as well. So the idea is that being packaged in that way, it can survive your stomach and make it all the way into the intestine where the bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, needs to be. And then as the outer shell dissolves, of course, it leaves all this nice gummy fiber around the probiotic, around the bacteria, So when they finally get where they're going, they're all, they're there, they're comfortable, bacteria, and they're surrounded by the food that they want to eat. So it's a really interesting technology, a real innovation, I think. And I've tried several probiotics, and this seems to be really good. So I take that as well here and there. I don't take it all the time, but if I have alcohol, or anything that's really bad for your gut, I'll take that the next day for sure. And I take it throughout the week. Quercetin is another one that I take. This is like a precursor to DAO. DAO being an enzyme that breaks down histamines in the body and in the gut. So quercetin's there's lots of reasons to take it. It's a great supplement for longevity as well, but that one I take every day, and that I would say number one with a bullet. That's the best supplement for hives, right up there with the vitamin D. It would be as important. Clear Benadryl is also worth mentioning, just as an antihistamine. I don't take it these days, but when I was reacting and I was miserable with the hives, Benadryl is one of the older generation of antihistamines. It's not great for preventing you from getting hives, but man, it really helps to take the edge off the itch. It's an antipruritic drug. It reduces the level of itching. And I could never take it. They were bright, bright pink capsules, and I used to react to the capsules themselves. And I think I was reacting to the coloring, but they now make them clear, and you can get clear Benadryl. And those I didn't react to, and oh man, they just take the itch down that little notch, and it's so much better just for getting through the really bad breakouts. So can't recommend those enough. Um, and DAO, I mentioned this in my other videos as well, but DAO is an enzyme that breaks down antihistamines that you can take before you eat, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes before you eat. And it really reduces the amount of histamine that's in your food as you're digesting it. It takes it away. It's just like somebody who's lactose intolerant might take lactase before they eat dairy. It's the same sort of idea. So it's not absorbed by the body, so you don't need to worry about taking it as far as the chemical impact on your body. And that's a great thing to take when you're at the tail end, when you're getting close to remission and you're just so tired of doing the low histamine diet and you want to open things up a little bit, eat some foods that you really enjoy. That's a great way to do it. And I've had periods where, the hives were kind of coming back, and I just didn't have the energy in me to go through the really difficult low histamine diet. I didn't have the energy for all that self-discipline. um, I was able in some circumstances to keep the hives at bay just by having DAO. And so, and some of these other supplements, and like the hives were there, but they were so under control of the DAO. I thought, well, good enough. I'm living hive free just by taking these things. So I've been sort of guilty of letting the hives go on for too long in the past, just leaning on that. It's such a good supplement for getting histamines out of your diet. So that's a really good one. So that's kind of what I do now for maintenance. It's basically watching what I drink, getting lots of sunlight, daily vitamin D, daily magnesium, probiotics, the seed when I like every other day, every 3 days, or when I think I need it. Quercetin every day. And that's it. I'm not taking DAO or anything like that now without the hives. And then finally, just one last thing I wanted to mention, because it just sort of struck me as odd, is I realized that I bought an Apple Watch and realized that I wasn't getting much deep sleep at all, and was really surprised by that. But it was a real steady routine. I just wasn't getting deep sleep. And so I started looking into that and noticed a connection between a lack of deep sleep and autoimmune issues. Like there's a real connection between poor sleep and those sorts of chronic health issues, specifically around autoimmune issues. So I went to see a couple doctors about that. I did a sleep study, and it turned out that I had quite severe sleep apnea. I think I was of all the levels, I was the top, like extreme sleep apnea. And I'm not a big heavy guy or anything like that. I barely even snored. Although I'm sure if my wife was watching this, she's laughing because she would say I do, but I wasn't a terrible loud snorer, you know. Um, but it turned out I had extreme sleep apnea, and I got a CPAP machine, and been using that. And now, of course, I get lots of, or much more, and deep sleep and better quality sleep and so forth. And that's also been in the last year where my hives have essentially resolved as well. So it may have played a role. And if you're somebody who's maybe suspicious that they've got a sleep issue, or maybe their spouse is telling them they're snoring quite a bit, might be something to look into, because it's definitely been connected to hives, and in my case, it also was associated with coming into remission. So don't know if that was the cause for me, but it was obviously could have been a contributor. So I thought I'd mention it. So yeah, so that's it. That's a lot. I know I've been talking for some time, so if you've made it to the end of the video, thanks for your attention. Really hope something in here clicks or makes sense or is relatable, and that you might be able to use it for yourself to help improve your situation. And again, I'll put links to these things that I'm mentioning and to the original video in the notes as well, so you can refer back. But yeah, best of luck to everybody. Hope that you can get on top of this crazy disease. Take care.